Hi, Kevin with Springfield Leather. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do two different things. We're going to make a handbag front for a child's handbag. I'm going to show you how to do a really easy, quick pattern that just about anybody can do, and it's your own pattern. Then we're going to show you how to stain it in sort of a retro fashion, and we're going to use just a couple of different products, and it'll be really easy, and you'll be surprised at the look that we get. So first thing we're going to do, of course, get our leather good and wet. And after we get it wet, we're going to let it sit for a minute to absorb all that water. And then we're going to do two things. We're going to sharpen our swivel knife. Doesn't take a lot to sharpen it because I kind of keep it polished all the time. Wipe the gunk off. Then we're going to make a pattern. Now you might think that that's difficult, but it's not. I'm going to turn it over so that the damp side is down, and I'm going to take a little piece of tracing film and just lay it there, and all I'm going to do is draw an S. Doesn't even matter if it's a very good S. I don't know how well we can see that, but there's the little S. Now once I've got my S on there, I'm going to add a couple of little bitty lines, just little ones. So this thing is kind of going to be a little bit like a flower vine, if you will. Here's what we have so far. Not too complicated, is it? Good, because that was the tough part right there. So feel free to do it over if you don't like your S. Now, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to use a little tracing tool, and I'm just going to trace over my S and all my little vine marks there onto the wet leather. You know, I don't even care if I follow the lines very closely or not. It just really doesn't matter. And again, as always, we're shooting this video just in store hours, so that you may see people wandering around or hear the phone ring or whatever the case. Now, happy days. Not too difficult. All I'm going to do for the other side is take a blank piece of tracing film and lay it down, and I'm just going to turn this piece of tracing film upside down so that whatever pencil marking or ink pen that I just used won't leave any marks on the leather, and I'm just going to trace over it again. Again, don't worry about following the lines perfectly because it's not necessary. And after you do about one of these, you might just find out you can do this freehand with no difficulty at all. Now if you were lucky enough or unlucky enough to have been around in the 60s and 70s, you've seen a lot of this type of thing. So that's what our pattern looks like. Next thing we do, we're going to cut it with a swivel knife. So here we go. Swivel knife, since it's already sharpened, it's just going to slide through this piece of Herman oak leather really well. And we kind of ease up as we come close to the S that we've traced onto the leather. Push down hard to start with. If you miss your lines a little bit, don't worry. Not the end of the world. Or even close. You want to make your lines curve a little bit more, feel free to do it because now is the time. Now our pattern's a little more visible. Kind of okay, huh? Now comes the fun part. All we're going to do is use some simple stamping tools. I have several here, and we're just going to pick these 5 to start with. And you'll probably recognize this when I put the designs into the leather. Before I do that, I have to get a hammer. Okay, we've got our hammer. I'm going to take this little cluster of leaves and I'm going to stamp it on, that one, this one, that one, this one. There. Simple, isn't it? I'm sure you're getting the idea. Now I'm going to take a little flower and I'm going to stamp it on that one, this one. Oh, let's do that one too. Oh, heck with it, we'll do them all. Nothing like flowers and leaves. Next, we're going to take a leaf, actually a couple of them. And on that S that we did, we're just going to randomly stamp a few of these leaves. Really doesn't matter where. You can just kind of pick. Okay, big leaves. Just takes you right back to 1972, doesn't it? Well, maybe not. If you're like me, you might not remember 1972. Then we're going to take a little leaf. Same thing. Just a few wherever you think they might be nice. Okay, once we've got all of our happy little leaves stamped in there, see, I think I see another place I'd like one. Now, not much to it. Very simple and very nice and very easy to do. It only takes you a minute or two. You can create your own pattern. Experiment a little bit and you'll have a good time with it. Now, once you got your pattern in there, we want to stain it. There are 400 million ways that you can stain a piece of leather. The way that I'm going to show you is just a simple way, and all you've got to have is a damp sponge. So I'm going to get one of those. Alright, back with my water jar. This is a genuine 100% Folgers Colombian grown water jar. Now before I dye this, I want to let you know this isn't entirely dry. There's some things that you can hurry right along and it really doesn't matter. And there's some things that you can't. You just have to learn those things as you go. So you're getting a little bit of a tip and a hint sort of as we go along. First thing you got to have is a damp sponge. I've got one here. And it's a really expensive one. Comes from Dollar General. Actually, I cut it in two. So it's a 50-cent General. But it works. I poured a little bit of a product called X1 into this container, and I put, probably a half a dozen drops of Phoebing's dark brown dye in here. You don't have to do that. You can use the X1 straight and it works just fine. But I wanted to give it a little brownish tint to what we're doing. So what I'm going to do, stick the corner of my sponge in here and get some liquid on it. Now, just so that everyone knows, my wife, as well as a great many of the people in here in this store, have told me that sometimes I'm not too bright. I'm going to verify that. I'm not using plastic gloves. If you want to use plastic gloves, more power to you. I'm not going to do it. Once I get that stuff on my sponge, I'm going to just wipe it into this piece of leather, and I'm going to get quite a bit of it right down into all those swivel cuts and stamped areas that we made. And I don't know how well you can see it from the camera's point of view, but as you work it, and you can tell I'm just rubbing it and working it and working it, it evens out wonderfully. The only real thing that you have to be conscious of using this stuff is just make sure that you get it down into the stamped areas and the cuts. That's kind of important. You need to do that. But you can do that. It's not hard. Now, this stuff, by the way, kind of wipes off your hands, which is nice. Now, I've got some on my hands here from an earlier project. I made some little bags for my grandkids the other day. And that's what inspired me to do this, thinking some people might like to watch. So I'm going to set this down on an old piece of tracing film. And next, I'm going to use a dry sponge. Now, this time we're going to use a regular Phoebing's alcohol-based dye. If you've never used this stuff, it can be a little bit scary. If you get this on you, it will stay on you for a while. I am living proof. Goes away after a day or so. Typically you don't use very much of it, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can really be a challenge to use. But here's a pretty easy way. I'm going to take a sponge. It's the other half of my Dollar General sponge. It's very dry, and that's the way I want it. It'll work if it's wet, but I'd rather have a dry one. I've got a large bottle of that dark brown dye, and rather than open a new small one, I'm going to use this. I'm going to hold my sponge up there really tight, and I just soaked a little bit of that dye onto this sponge. Not enough to go through, but just a little bit. And we're going to put the lid back on. Nextly, I'm going to take this little piece of cardboard, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of that dye off. I don't want it on there. I've wiped all the excess dye off. There's still quite a bit of dye on this sponge. It'll stain you right now, but I got a bunch of that immediate excess off of the sponge. Now I'm going to move my marble to where it's at the edge of the table, and I'm going to go right over the top of that finish that I just put on here. And since I've got the marble near the edge of the table, it kind of lets me just do the edge of this project how I want to. I'm going to put a sort of a dark edge on it. And you'll immediately see what you can do with this as you begin to play with it. Now I've got the edges done. Okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to dye the center of this. But when you do that, you want to make sure you have very little dye on your sponge. So this time, you see how much more comes off? It just keeps coming off. I'm going to get the vast majority of that dye off of here. That way I can put it on the leather with confidence. And I'm going to start at the edges, and I'm just going to start wiping and rubbing inwards towards the center. And I'm going to go all the way around. Now again, just letting you know, we went right over the top of that other product before it had even dried. This is one of those instances where you can do that. We call that particular product X1 or another X1, or another name for it that we have here is goof proof. It works really well, and it's called goof proof for obvious reasons. That's pretty nice. All I'm going to do as a final step is spray it with a leather finish, and I'm done. And that'll make a little handbag front that some little kid will just be tickled with. Now we just need to see if it has the SLC seal of approval. Maybe you could bring our inspector over here. Come here, Bobby. This is Bubby. He is one of many of the Springfield Leather mascots here. He is the snippiest, snarliest little chihuahua you've ever seen in your life, and he tries to bite everything, even if he likes it. If Bubby doesn't say anything, it's good. What do you think, Bubby? Passes. I thought I'd take a minute and also show you an alternative way to really spice up this sort of design if you wish. Just kind of to step it up a little bit, like Emerald says, or whatever he does. This is the same pattern that we have on our finished piece. The thing that we're going to do differently is make some additions with our swivel knife. It's pretty amazing what a few decorative cuts will do. So just kind of watch. Again, make sure your swivel knife is sharp and concentrate on making just short, little bitty cuts. Don't have to be very long at all. And we're just going to make some sort of where the little flower stems come and attach. Every few places you'll just see some. Usually when you make a decorative cut, you want to make some little accent cuts if you can. Now here's what we've got so far, but we're going to keep on going a little bit. You can see that really helps. It doesn't take a lot to do that. Every time you make nice decorative cuts, you actually create a place where you can make more decorative cuts. And you can really give some flow to your design. And depending on how much room you have, you can really make some nice use of your leather and your space that you've got to work with. And you'll kind of see here as we go along. And these type of cuts are so simple that once you understand how to make them look like they flow with the leather, really is kind of nice. Now see? It keeps getting just a little bit, I don't know, maybe more enjoyable is the word. We'll do one more pass here. This time we're going to add a squiggle. We're going to make a little straight line with a circle under it. And gosh, you could just go on and on and on and never stop. People will think you're a genius once you get to do this, by the way. See our happy little squiggle up there? And that's good. When you use that X1 stain and it gets down into all those cuts, boy, that really makes your work look nice. Thought you might like to see that. Thanks.